just rented a storefront and you open up your business, cutting hair, or selling tacos, you know. And today it's insane the amount of fees that everybody's taking, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there, right? So it's creating a pathway and reducing fees and creating spaces for people to be able to share.
So, yeah. I'm so grateful to hear you say that. And one thing I have to say, I appreciate that you're giving concrete examples of what to do, because I think a lot of times we have a lot of platitudes and everyone knows to say the right thing, but when it comes to nuts and bolts, there's no imagination. So I think the history that you're bringing to this conversation is really enriching it. So with that history, you've worked with who knows how many mayors over the years. And obviously there are, like you said, challenges that are unique to the mission, but the mayor does play a role in that. So I know you haven't endorsed anyone, and probably the smartest thing is there's a whole bunch of people running and saying for you, and who knows what. But how would you describe, I guess, your working relationship with maybe, let's say, the top candidates, to the point, you have these great ideas, but can they actually be accomplished with theirs?
Well, it depends who's mayor.
Right, so.
And I have, you know, I was a kid. I remember when I worked with Mayor Joseph Alioto, and we created a summer program to hire young people, you know, all across the city. We created a coalition of Filipinos, Latinos, blacks, you know, whites, and Asians, and that was the beginning of the first time I had experience working with the mayor. And then of course Mayor George Moscone, and may he rest in peace. But from Feinstein to, you know, up to currently to Mayor Breed. And every single mayor's relationship has been different. You know, with a common thread is two things. One, I have disagreed with each and every one of them. I have argued with each and every one of them. But I maintain a relationship with each and every one of them. And at the end of the day is to know that we've been able to stay focused on one thing and getting one thing done, you know, and to agree to disagree, right? But at the same time to stay focused on one thing. And I think that's the magic salsa that I have, is I stay focused on one thing and just get it done. And if I have to do whatever I gotta do, they know that I'm not gonna go away.
Okay, so kind of going back to your tenure as a community leader and activist,
Are you going to let me
how do
speak?
you anticipate bringing that energy,
If they call me.
the energy of organizing, the grassroots energy, and
She ignored me on
really
the first question.
bring it to bear, I guess, in the supervisor's office? Because
And
it
if
does
not,
seem that
will
by
you resign
design,
and
a
protest?
supervisor's role is about the me. But your
I've been having my flag
approach,
raised.
your success has been steeped in the we. So how do you translate that to life?
It's to stay with the we. And it begins, and we began the we now in this campaign. We're running a we campaign. I'm not running an I campaign. We're running a we campaign. And part of that we is that we, and I invite those who haven't been part of the campaign, join the campaign. We're writing the narrative. We're writing the platform. We're creating a plan, because that's the other thing is everybody gets elected and then they don't know what to do, right? What we're doing is we're creating the platform now, right? So when we win, we're off and running. We know exactly what policies, we know exactly what needs to be changed, we know exactly what legislation we need to present and work through and get done what needs to be done in D9 and the rest of the city.
And so, you know, obviously you have to work with the mayor, but you also have to work with the other supervisors. And so the ideas that you have, the coalition that you've built, how has how has it been received? I know you've been endorsed by Shimon Walton and Myrna Melgar, but how do you see the building a coalition amongst the supervisors going for you?
It's staying focused on one thing.
What's your one thing?
So, for example, housing. Let's take, because we already talked about safety. So housing. So our governor says he's mandating we build 80,000 new homes, right? Well, do you know that there is developers that have bought land, got architects, have designed, and gone to the planning department and have gotten approval and have entitled properties. There's 80,000 ready to go, ready to be built, right? Number one. So why are we building those? So that's what we need to tackle. We need to tackle that, right? I think the other thing too is that we, with other supervisors, is working with them to see, like, for example, on the west side, how can we work together to also build on the west side, right? How do we also look at other neighborhoods, right? Where can we, it's doing an inventory, right? And so collectively, I want to bring and meet with every supervisor and say, what do you have? What inventory do you have in your neighborhood? What about you? What about you? What about you, right? And so once we come up with an inventory, and again, then it goes to empowering them, because it's each supervisor going to his community or her community, right, and saying, this is what I got. And then from there is to begin to really create synergy around building housing and really look at the next 3 years, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 20 years, and the next 30 years. Because you're not going to solve the housing problem overnight or in 1 year. But what we don't have is we don't have a plan. And that's what I'm calling for, is to work with every one of the members of the board from the other districts to create a master plan.
So then the question that comes up for me from that is, again, each of the districts is unique. And with the idea of having community input and support, which is great, wouldn't you agree that there have been instances of almost too much of that, to the point where there has been an undermining of efforts to build housing? Just thinking back, I think it was like 2019, the laundromat space, and the current supervisor, fought it. And they had to go do this back and forth, and her argument against it was shadows, which I will never understand the shadow thing, y'all. I'm so sorry. But how do we find that? What is that balance, that sweet spot? I mean, we all agree we need housing, but every single person, it seems, has a different view of what that housing looks like. How do we go from, we all agree on the problem, but we all just seem to disagree on the routes to take? What do you do to get us from the conversation to the decisive, this is the action?
It's about bringing people together. And when we talk about building housing, who builds them? It's people. So that means let's bring in our unions. Let's bring in all our unions at the table. Because our unions can help us build housing. Just think about this. All the unions have pension funds, right? They all have funds, right? How about some of the unions start taking some of their money and investing it in building housing in San Francisco? That's an asset, right? And look at city government and what funding can the city invest, again, in the next 30 years. Bringing in the state of California to invest, bringing in the federal government. That has never been done, because it's always these piecemeal projects. Oh, the shadow, or the rest. We've all heard the rest, right? It's petty. Nobody rises above all that and thinks and has a vision, and that's what I'm talking about, is we need to have a vision and we need to have a plan, but that means we got to bring all the stakeholders, right, in a table, in a room, and just work through it. It takes time, it's painful sometimes, but at the end, if we stay together, we can get it done. And that's what I've been able to do. Small, a lot of the housing here, right, is, our mission.
No eviction.
Our mission.
No eviction.
Our mission.
No eviction.
And we did. We fought the evictions and we got affordable housing units built, one at a time. And we've gotten over 1,400 units done. So we know how to work together. We know how to bring people together. And that's what we need. Is we need to bring everybody together at the table.
Excellent. So one last question on housing. Bringing everybody together, does that also mean that you are open to and supportive of all housing or just affordable?
So I've been labeled as, and I'm glad you bring that question, as just fighting for low-income housing. Bus drivers, muni bus drivers, live across the bay. They should be able to live here. Firefighters don't live in San Francisco. If we had an emergency, and we've had them before, earthquakes, a lot of our firefighters don't live here. They need to live here. Our nurses, our doctors, our teachers, thank you. So you know what? We need to build a housing for everybody. Everybody that works in San Francisco should be able to live in San Francisco. And part of that, one of the things I'm calling for is first-time home buyer. You know what? People can't buy a home today. And we should be building housing, as an example, where you could, if you don't have the down payment, you can lease with an option to buy. And let's say in 5 years from now, that rent that you pay goes toward your down, you get credit for your down payment so that you can become a homeowner. And that's the other thing that we've got to prioritize is creating first-time home buyer program for everybody. Whether it be a dishwasher, or whether it be a teacher, or whether it be the muni bus driver.
We can spend the rest of the day on that. We got things to talk about. So talking about the tragedy of the drug crisis. Now you are, I believe it's 28 years sober?
27.
27, which is awesome. Round of applause for that. So, your battle is different from what we're seeing out on the street, but it is related. And so what would you say, or what should the city be focusing on when trying to help those dealing with addiction that is not doing that?
Services on demand. You can get Comcast on demand, 500 stations, right? And I'll tell you, I really feel that from my own experience as a drug addict and as an alcoholic, you're sick. You're sick, and you need to heal. And healing on the street isn't going to happen. You get these young kids that are out there selling drugs. It's no different, the kids that are selling fentanyl today than the kids who were selling heroin. It was no different than the kids that were selling crack, right? It gets on the street by these young kids who are just trying to make a buck. But then they get hooked, and they're sick, right? And then they die, right? But really, the big people who are making the money, right? They never go to jail. They never get arrested because they find a whole new person, right? So arresting, right? It's about putting them in treatment programs. And I'll give you one story because I have the responsibility. If you call me and you call me at 2 a.m. and tell me you're drunk or you're on drugs, I will get out of bed and come help you. Me and my wife, we've had plenty of people that we brought to our home and we have helped heal them. One story. Fentanyl, a family told me their kid was in the Tenderloin on fentanyl, crying, mom, several times. I went looking for him. It took me 3 weeks, I finally found him. I gave him a burner phone because I knew that he would not come with me. And I said, whenever you're ready, because you will get at a certain point in your addiction that you're gonna feel you're gonna die, call me, but make one promise and shake my hand that you will not sell this phone for drugs. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, he called me and said, come get me. He was dying. I went and got him. But let me tell you my experience in the Tenderloin. Every time I went to the Tenderloin, there was people laid on the floor. And I called several supervisors, the mayor, our director of the Department of Public Health, and said, why are we allowing people to die on the street? And across the board, the answer was, well, legally, we can't get them. We can't pick them. We don't have consent. And I said, oh, really? So if you get shot and you're laying on the sidewalk, bleeding to death, unconscious, we don't have consent, but we're picking you up. So what's the difference, right? There is no difference. They said, oh, well, we could get sued. Well, who would sue you if you saved their life? And if you did get, for whatever reason, somebody to sue you, and you went through the court process, what jury in their right mind is going to award them money for their life being saved? And it was hard for me, because this young man that I went and got, I could not get him into a bed. And I have everybody on speed dial and could not get him a bed. We landed up taking him in. And that's what we need. We need to look at how we're using our funds and make them work so that people out on the street get picked up, get taken. Because when you're like, we pick you up. You're laying down, we pick you up. Yep. And we take you to a facility where we're going to heal you. We're going to give you love. We're going to treat you so that you can get better. And if you leave, you leave, but we're going to keep trying. We don't give up. And that's what's happening too often, is that we're giving up on people.
So that was really powerful, but I can't help but wonder, hearing the compassion that you extended to the low-level dealers, because you're right, if they get arrested, they just get replaced by somebody the very next day. But how do you balance that with the concerns and the fear of people who are living in these neighborhoods who say, I hear what you're saying about that kid, I'm so sorry, but I don't feel safe going down to the end of my block to go catch the bus because these dealers or these people are here. How do you respond to those neighbors?
24th and Mission. How did we get so bad at 24th and Mission? How did we get so bad at 16th and Mission? Because they cleaned up Union Square, remember that? They did a whole cleanup. They even put a command headquarters RV at Union Square. And then everybody started going to Tenderloin, and then everybody started coming, you arrest them. You arrest them. But knowing the system, you get out, you come back in, you get back out, you go back in, you get back out. Where is the treatment? We're not solving the problem. And that's what we need to do is, again, services on demand, and really create a program where we're here to heal you. And that's what we don't have. We have this revolving door. That's it. And here in the Mission, that's exactly what happened. Now we fought for 2 years to get an ambassador program. And then look what happened, SF Safe. What a scandal, right? Now we don't have ambassadors on Mission Street. That was criminal. That we fought for 2 years to get ambassadors, and
all right. So want to hear from you all, and I'm sure there are some amazing questions. Who has the disco mic? All right, by the way, everyone say, hey, Mikey. Mikey's the newest, it is Mikey, right? We just met today. He's the newest member of our fence team. He's hiding behind a pole, but you will see him when he comes in. Yes. All right, so let's see. Hands up, 60-second questions.
Right there.
H, I'm gonna start with you, but just going over my ground rules because living room, we're respecting each other. 60 seconds, a question, not a statement, not a manifesto, not a pronouncement. I wanna get as many of your questions as possible. So H, we start with you. 60 seconds.
Yeah, Roberto, you were nice enough to speak to me before the event started. I said, would you be in favor of legalizing sex trading? And you said, why not? And I said, would you be opposed to taking some of those 55 storefronts on Mission and turning them into brothels? Would you be opposed to that?
Absolutely not.
How about you also said that you would be in favor of electing a police chief? And you said, what group is behind it? I said, Michael Hennessy was behind it, and I've been carrying that flag since Hennessy retired. Will you commit to and support a movement for the citizens of San Francisco to elect their police chief?
Absolutely.
All right, so starting on, okay, I have a question at the table, Mikey. And then who will be the next person?
Yeah, my question is regarding, I'm born and raised in Mission Valley. I was born in '61. I was lucky to go to Catholic school for 3 years. After that, I went to public schools. There's a huge inequity when it comes to schools. I'm talking about elementary schools. It was so bad, the schools there, that my brother left, he couldn't read. He couldn't even read his diploma when he graduated high school, John Common. This is what happens. They don't learn to even read, write. And they're fall through the cracks because they're never assessed for disability. So this is a big deal that a lot of kids are falling through the cracks. So and really the neighborhoods, there's better schools. Let's face it, where's everybody go? Rooftop. They all want the kids to go to certain clarity. We all know, I sent my oldest kids to E.L. Clariento. That's pretty far away. That's out there by Pacific Heights. So they wouldn't fall through the cracks like I did and my brother. I became a city carpenter. I was lucky, tradesman. My brother became a sheet metal worker. So the trades are very important. We went to John O'Connell. We have to make sure that we have like John O'Connell trade schools. We have to make sure that the schools in the low income areas, which is, let's face it, a lot of schools in District 9 fall through the cracks. So we need to bring them up to par with other neighborhoods.
Your question?
That's it. How do we bring these schools up to par with other neighborhoods? Straight up.
First of all, that's a responsibility of the Board of Education. Second of all, it's about how we invest our money and how do we hold people accountable. The fact is that the school district, couldn't even get payroll.
Yes.
That was criminal. Somebody should have gone to jail.
Right?
Talking about arresting people, somebody should have gone to jail for that.
Yep.
So when you look at accountability of our schools, it's a relationship and responsibility of all city government to make sure our children get educated. The Board of Supervisors has a role. The mayor has a role. The Board of Supervisors, Board of Education has a role. And I really don't see a lot of that, again, sitting around in a room, and figuring it out. It's solo. We gotta end that solo. We gotta work together.
Gentleman here in the blue chair, and then we can come back to that.
Thank you. Hi, very good to meet you. My first time here.
Welcome, man.
Thank you. I've lived in the city for 13 years. I've been curious, like you were talking about a program for leasing to own homes. and making it more possible to live in the city, because it is just getting more and more expensive. And I guess what I'm wondering is, that seems like a great program, because that's reducing barriers to living in the very expensive places that exist here. But how, in the longer term, do you see the solution to the fact that places are so expensive playing out? How do you solve the problem of, no matter how many barriers you remove to ownership, if the cost of ownership for a very small home is still astronomical, it is going to be out of reach for a lot of people. So, bigger cities than San Francisco have cheaper housing. How does San Francisco get actually cheaper housing?
And actually, to piggyback on that, we had an event like 2 weeks ago, and it was about real estate, and we talked about housing. And right now, construction costs for new residential housing are averaging about $1,000 a square foot. When they said that, though, you literally heard every mic drop. That's insane. So now your answer.
Currently in San Francisco, we have 40,000 vacant units. I've met with numerous property owners that have vacant units, and I've asked that question. Why do you keep your unit vacant? Panoramic got all kinds of different answers. One of them was, well, I'm waiting for the next whatever so I can rent at whatever, right? Unaffordable for everybody else. But what I found interesting in those conversations, that I asked the question, would you be willing to sell? A lot of them said, yeah, there's not a market, right? So if you say, let's take 20% of 40,000, and we got 8,000 property owners who would be willing to lease with an option to buy, we're creating 8,000. And we create a tax incentive for these property owners, where they're gonna get a tax write-off for selling with a lease with an option to buy. It's thinking out the box. That's how we're gonna get there. This business as usual, not gonna work. We gotta think out the box.
Hi, thank you so much for your time. So the first question is, what are your thoughts on how Mayor London Breed has impacted District 9 and then San Francisco in general? And then the second one is also, what are your thoughts on a ceasefire in Palestine?
So London Breed in District 9, well, during the pandemic, she did an amazing job in our community. Every time we called her and asked her for whatever we needed, because a lot of the city departments, including the health department, did not have a plan. And so we consistently had to call the mayor and say, hey, they don't have COVID testing, they don't have this, they don't have that. And that's why we, and I want to acknowledge my sister Valerie here from the Latino Task Force, and everybody else here that was part of the Latino Task Force. We saved lives. We did the job the city should have done. And it was the failure of departments, and not all of them, but several of them, that failed to step up and do the work that was needed in San Francisco, and especially in our community, which in D9 was the most affected than any other district in San Francisco. On other issues, in terms of housing, I think she could have done better. No doubt about that. No question that. I've argued it until I was black and blue in the face about housing with her and a lot of other issues. But I believe that we've been able to come to understanding on a whole lot of other issues that I don't have enough time to to go into right now. But I really believe that we as a community, whether it be her or whatever mayor, you have to stand up and you have to speak up and you have to come with a concrete plan. And if you don't have a concrete plan, to just say we have a problem, solve it, it ain't gonna happen. It was just like the ambassadors, you know? We tried, and I'm not gonna get into all the people that we tried through city departments and whatnot. We couldn't get it done. Finally had to go to her and saying, hey, your city department people just are not working, they're not cooperating, you know? In fact, the conversation went like this at the end. I said, if these city folks that work for the city, if they worked in the private sector, they'd all be fired. Because they couldn't get something done in 3 months. They couldn't get it done in 6 months. They couldn't get it done in 9 months. They couldn't get it done in a year. And so you have all these levels of bureaucracy and the blame game.
Do you want to answer the second question?
What are your thoughts on the ceasefire in Palestine?
We have, in San Francisco, stood up against the war in Vietnam. We've been a city that's about love and peace, and we do not need our money being spent for more bombs and killing people around the world. It's not only there, it's around the world. We got a war going around the world. And every time I see the news and they say, oh, well, Senate just approved, or the Congress approved $100 billion for killing, but yet we here in San Francisco, we just learned that they're going to close schools because we don't have money.
I heard some. Okay. Gotta run over. Get your steps in. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about all the closed businesses. You were talking about the Mercado at 22nd and Mission, and that was like really a hub for the neighborhood until it burned down. It's been 10 years now, and it's still closed. Luca, I don't know what's happening on the ground floor of Luca with the floor and everything, but that's been closed 5 years now. What can you do to get more businesses that are just closed down to reopen? It feels like, I don't know how they can continue to keep these storefronts empty without having any paying tenants in them. So what's your plan for that?
22nd Mission, we should buy that property. Because if the property owner, long history, that fire 1, fire 2, fire 3, that building got put on fire 3 times. There's a plan to build. We could buy it. Let's buy the land. And let's get the money so that we can not only build housing and we can build, the medical again. It's a we. It's we. Only we can do it together. And all these other buildings that are vacant, we got actually a grant for $50,000, and in fact, he's here today. We have Pablo Wong. Raise your hand, Pablo Wong. We asked Mayor Reed to give us the funding so that we can do an inventory of all the buildings that are vacant. And so now we have the inventory. We know who the properties owners are. We know if they're willing to sell, and what the sale price is. We know if they will lease and what the lease are. We know what they're zoned for. So now we have a full inventory, right? And we've been successful one at a time getting those storage fronts filled. But if you can imagine if we marketed and just had just a little bit more, that was only $50,000. Can you imagine when I just had a little bit of marketing money and did a marketing campaign and say the Mission is open for business? We can get an Argentinian leather store in there. We can get a Cuban cigar store open with some cafecito from Cuba, right? Wouldn't that be cool? That'd be cool. You know, we can get guayaberas. You know, you cannot buy a guayabera any longer on Mission Street. We can get from Melida, the capital guayaberas, get some shipped over here and give an opportunity for somebody to open up a guayabera shop. A Colombian, los Colombianos, they have delicious coffee. Can you imagine we had cafe from Colombia and there was a Colombiano coffee shop with some of them empanadas they make? You know, it's about being creative. You know, and we can do this. We can together do this.
All right, we have time for one more question. All right, Kathy, you know my rule. It has to be amazing. The best question all night. No pressure whatsoever.
Well, I was thinking of the last election that we recently had, and I can't remember the proposition letters or whatever they were, E and F, but anyway, the progressive side of them lost. For instance, the one I remember, people over 50 who did not have children dependents, but were found to be under the influence or drug addicts. Now, don't ask how they were going to test them and find this out, because it wasn't in that proposition. But it said that they would be offered immediate treatment and housing, or they're going to arrest them or something. That, I thought, no way in hell that's going to pass. Well, wrong again. It did pass. For me, the redeeming quality was that I knew the city did not have the housing or the treatment to offer. So when was this ever going to really happen? But it is now part of the city policy. And how are you going to deal with that? And there were 2 on the ballot that had to do with police and taking giving more authority to the police department, like they didn't have to keep the records and all that. How are you going to deal with those particular propositions that are now part of city statute? And the approach, I know it wasn't a very populated election in terms of voting, but nonetheless, these passed. How are we going to deal with the community that would support that kind of view? Oh, taking all those people off, they couldn't have any benefits if they didn't have children. I'm not making it clear, I'm sorry.
No, I think the question is clear, so we'll give Roberto a chance.
The roots of the problem. That's what we need to do, is we need to address the roots of the problem. And when we begin to do a comprehensive analysis, data, and look at the roots of the problems, we can create a holistic program so those, again, who are sick, who need help, right, are giving the help that they need. Remember, what was it, Cash? Care Not Cash? We've been down this path before, right? And failed. So we know that there's people in terms of elections, people right now are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and enough is enough, right? So people are
Demonizing.
So there's this anger right now. There's this quick fix, right? And what we really need to do is we really need to sit back and we really need to evaluate, analyze, and create solutions that deal with the roots of the problem so that we're creating pathways, right? Pathways. One step at a time. It's like I'm in recovery. It's one step at a time, right? If we really start looking at one step at a time, helping somebody, one thing at a time, right? We will get there, right? But we just can't, again, these Band-Aid solutions don't work. Because once the Band-Aid comes off, the bleeding continues. And so we gotta treat people as human beings with dignity and respect. And that's with the failure of our city department, where when you look at the health department again, I think by now you all know that I got an issue with the health department. But when you look at the health department, where is the health department? They weren't there for the pandemic, for COVID, and they sure as hell ain't there for this fentanyl. They have no plan that's an effective plan to deal with this drug that's killing people. And it didn't happen yesterday, it didn't happen last month, this has been going on. And they still haven't figured it out. And they're not being held accountable. And so it's about holding people accountable, but at the same time, again, bringing people in the room, right? When have you heard of anybody? I know about it, Sister Valley. Have we been called about fentanyl to sit around in a room? We have not. In our community, I know the black community, they haven't. In fact, I was recently with some African American brothers who were affected, and we were talking about the fentanyl problem. Again, it's we as a community have had to take the lead because we have a failed system, and nobody's holding them accountable.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being on our stage, being the first of the D9 candidates to grace our stage. He will not be the last. And I would be remiss if I did not say a round of applause for Mrs. Hernandez. We begin with the part. We all know that. So thank you all so much for coming out to Manny's. As I said, this is one of a series of conversations with the candidates who are running for your vote. So please continue to follow us. We're on all the platforms as Welcome to Manny's, so you can see what that schedule is. We are going to be doing programming around the mayor's race, as you can imagine. We have so much going on, I don't have it all memorized. Speaking about kind of the federal conversation, I think you might be really interested. Tomorrow we have Maxwell Frost, who is a congressman from Central Florida. He is 25 years old, the first Gen Z congressperson. So his story is powerful, and what he has been able to do and is continuing to do really is inspiring. So I invite you all to come back tomorrow. He's going to be here tomorrow at 7:30. But like I said, this stage is where you want to be when you want to know what's going on in D9. Thank you all so much. Have a good night.